remember thinking that the old picture of me in the living room was odd. I would spend hours in front of it, estranged by how it seemed to watch me, the eyes following me from one side of the room to the other. I don't recall when, where, by whom, or even whether it was with relief or terror that I discovered the picture was not of me, but of my silent brother. Although I don't fully understand why, I cannot ask about him. In my home, there's a tacit oath to silence, and all that I can know without breaking it is on a few dog-eared sheets of paper, photos which invoke only his first 7 years, and a dusty box of his belongings on the uppermost shelf of my parents' closet. But how was I to have known upon my first encounter with it 7 years ago that the cartridges in the hidden suitcase held within them a show of light that, to defeat death, seems to translate life onto a thin strip of celluloid? Now I may think I see the stolid shape liberated from the coffin of still photographs for the first time, attempting to evade my gaze as much as I long to read into his movement more deeply, to revive him and divide, once and for all, who he was from who I'm not. In October of an unknown year, he wrote,
"Today I decided you must no longer be among the living. I cannot breathe with you still breathing. Nothing is clear with you still here. Tomorrow I shall decide upon how I shall kill you and know who I am. You will not want to live with me still living. I know that you will not want to inhale the air I breathe, to sour among such clarity, and forget the need to stop and offer charity.
I mustn't delude myself. As I watch, I realize this cannot be him, and that, if in fact these are reels of his, parts of a tragic, unfinished project I don't want to finish for him, he and I are again joined in that vague space outside of the frame where identity remains a mystery, and purpose defined by the roving search of an uncertain eye.
Nosotros, ovejas vuestras, descarriadas de vuestro rebaño, muchas veces elegido los pastos venenosos de este engañoso mundo, dejando los saludables de vuestra doctrina. Os suplicamos, Señor, nos perdonéis esta ofensa contra vos cometida. Nos pesa en el alma de haberos ofendido. Proponiendo firmemente la enmienda, esperamos por los méritos de vuestro Santísimo Hijo, conseguir la felicidad de vuestra gloria. Os pedimos coloquéis las almas de los justos, que detenidas padecen en el purgatorio. Señor, dejaos ver de vuestros amigos los justos, y llegue el día feliz que vayan purificados a descansar en paz, y gozar de vuestra divina presencia por toda la eternidad. Amén.
It's been over 27 years now, and to speak of him in my home is still to undo the gauze and pressure fresh blood from old wounds. Perhaps they do not know that at the age of 12 I spent the entire summer rummaging through drawers, looking into old photographs, wanting to discover how it was that he died. Perhaps they do not know that old pictures of him now constitute a part of my mistaken memories, and that I know, and cannot forget, that my presence is indebted to his absence, and that despite her agony and fate, my mother had disobeyed doctors wanting to resurrect the dead. How many times have I wanted to interrupt her from clipping from the rose bush to explain to me who he was in life, and how it was that I came to replace him? How many times have I noticed the flowers she puts before his ever-fading photograph, only to think of his stillness and the privilege of his silence, his immutable purity that seems to scold me, reminding me to behave, reminding me to serve his essence well. And could my father recall if I took him from his gardening to remind him of that once? when he came home inebriated and spoke of how, then, my mother's health ailing and with the loss still burning in his breast, he found despair etched into firm soil, and relief in an angry shovel. I think that perhaps I cannot invoke the courage to ask them my questions, fearing that their responses may not be enough, of disturbing how my parents have come to reconcile their emotions, or for knowing that they, in speaking of him, will only remember oaths and release an unbearable eulogy. I often wonder if they're still waiting for the right moment to give me an explanation, or if they assume that I should know everything already, as if instead of being born into his place, I was washed out of the canal next to the railroad tracks of my town, in time to recall the incident among other childhood follies. Observing it closely in old photos, I'm convinced that this location, the railroad tracks, the canal, must offer more about a boy who, having grown up with this as his playground, may have left many hidden traces of himself. But what can I expect to find? This is not the first time that I haunt the canal and the tracks, believing that I may piece together the fragments of an irretrievable past. In October of an unknown year, he wrote,
I was about 9,
and
as I waited for Mom in the car, I stared out the window and realized it was I staring out of the window. But there were suddenly many windows, and I could not comprehend the process of viewing through so many layers and possibilities, so I froze. The thought of acknowledging myself both within and without windows and hollow spaces caused me to lose all sense. A part of me wanted to come back. A part of me was hollering and kicking inside, but I could not move, precisely because I felt so alive.
I realize how ridiculous this may become when I see the next generation of Mexican children in this neighborhood watching how the train goes by. I'm tempted to think that if I should ask them and break the oath, they would know precisely how to respond to all of my questions. But I seem to have decided that I can only find him in traces, and that what I want to know perhaps can no longer be told, especially not by them who, as I see them and don't see them, do not understand what I'm searching for and has happened here. Still, I might tell the boy who now occupies our former home not to play on his playground, to not get too close to the tracks, to stay away from the canal. But the natural manner with which he disregards my camera to feel the vibrating tracks, as he probably does every time the train shakes his home before disappearing into the horizon, reminds me that he lives here now, and that warnings often come too late. The irony of seeking him in remnants is that, more than remembering him, they mainly emphasize the parameters of his absence. Still, I must rediscover the H suitcase hidden in the darkest closet of my family's history with older, wider eyes. In my first encounter with it many years ago, all of the articles within it seemed abandoned shells, once animate objects turned into deflated forms. Now I can imagine how each article, by its own right, presents itself with a story, only to be pushed aside by myriad possible memories which the clothes and the toys themselves seem to want to relate. But as I sift through them, I cannot help but notice the hollow spaces in the eyes of his smiling mask, and am back to believing that none of this will reveal anything more than the history of a physical presence that, now, refuses to be physically present. And if pictures capture moments and speak volumes, then I've become fatigued by searching for the moments and the lessons these pictures pretend to offer. Although I've stared into them long enough to incorporate them into my own history and give a semblance of sense to what they represent, it is still unnerving to see his motionless shape. At once we're too much alike and not at all. At once I become both redemption and replacement. It's too easy to render the still image in a larger size. Frame shadows in gold and bring flowers to them, thinking that what lies there is more than a vacant body in its black and white, 8 by 10 inch coffin. a sense of having been present, a sense of transcending the stillness of these pictures. My absent memories still need a more vivid shot, so the life which merits this wake might awaken. I understand that if I had known him, I would not have to look deeply into these pictures to recall having lived a lifetime together. I do not have that kind of memory, and so I must see through guilty eyes which, knowing only that he dies, find that death never ceases to surround him. If this were him, I would record the footage as a memory and imagine myself as the presence behind the camera, haunting the past as he now haunts the present, to arrive at a sense of how we are different and I, finally separated from the inheritance of his death. But this camera has not captured him, so I am back to where I began with these two reels I've avoided, and not wanting to assume that I may be seeing through his eyes, and not wanting to accept what all of this, in spite of me, has become. I did not want to finish his project. In October of unknown years, he wrote,
I dart back. I'm against the wall, wanting to fade into the mark of my shadow. I know, these are the moments in which some odd voice peers up from behind to remind me that it has all gone wrong, and that when I reach for the embrace, my arms will become the whips to lash you with. I want it all out of me. I have arrived at this weak hour, and sense is but a selfish tool to help us sleep through these 60 sour minutes that are neither day nor night and torture. I have never wanted to cause you this harm. Forgive me for feigning that I may cause you no harm, when I know that harm is all that this and I can do you.
This and I can do you. How was I to have known upon my first encounter with them that the cartridges in the hidden suitcase contained a show of light which, rather than defeating death, could only translate dying onto a thin strip of celluloid? Although the shadow which lurks onto the screen, torturing this boy with his own mortality, may have me believe that there can still be more to him than the frustration I've found in still photos and quiet objects. The enduring uncertainty of his presence off camera and out of view invokes only more statements I shouldn't make and questions I could not ask. All I can find in this violence are the persisting remnants and settled rights in a home with an unsettling silence. The stubborn oath which will keep me from knowing how it became that, in November of 1972, the lifeless body of José Melero Carrera was found, blue and swollen, damming the drain of the canal next to the railroad track.